Great. Well, it looks like actually a good portion of our classes signed in. So we can just kind of go ahead and jump right in right on time. Perfect. So welcome everybody to our class today, Summer Care for Native Plants. My name's Kristen Barker. I'm the Community Education Coordinator here at the Garden. And I'm really happy to be joined, have Chip Grubbs joining us today. And I'll hand it over to him in just a minute. But before I do, I just kind of want to go over the format of the class. I'm sure most of us are familiar with Zoom at this point and, webinars and all that. But in case we have anybody new, just kind of want to let you know how it goes. But so, I encourage everybody to use the Q&A if you have any questions throughout Chip's presentation. We're going to pause kind of periodically throughout his talk to address some of your questions, but then we'll have time at the end dedicated a little bit more to Q&A. So don't worry if your question doesn't get addressed right away. I might just be holding on to it for a minute. I also encourage everyone to use the chat. We kind of got that going already. It's a nice way to connect with each other. Those of you who are taking the class at home, can kind of share your experiences as well. And a nice way, if you look at your chat bar, right now, it may just say 2 panelists. If you click that blue box, it'll drop down and it'll say 2 panelists and attendees. And that way you can kind of chat with each other. And also we are recording this. So, if you have to step away or, you can only stay for half the class, don't worry, we'll have this recorded and you can catch it again on the digital content page of our website, which is calbg.org. And I typically am able to have that posted by the end of the day on Monday. So you'll be able to find that there. And lastly, Chip's going to mention a lot of references of, either websites or books or things like that. And don't worry if you, don't write them down perfectly. I send a follow-up email after the class with all of those links and titles of books and etc. So you'll have that in an email from me after the class. And so I think that's it for me. With that, I'd like to introduce Chip. Chip is a horticulturist here at CalBG. You may recognize him if you took a class in February with us called Habitat Gardening for Birds and Other Pollinators. He led us through that talk, and it was a great class. And so he's back again, and he's gonna walk us through summer care for native plants. At the garden here, he maintains a huge area, and it has a wide variety of plants from, California desert to Channel Islands to woodland or mountain stream to chaparral woodland. Am I missing anything? Wildflower meadow.
Riparian areas, which you kind of mentioned, the mountains. Yeah, just the entire state of California, all in, multiple acres squished together. So.
Right, yeah. So he has a wide variety of experience with many different types of plants. So he's a great person to lead us through this talk today. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Chip. Thanks, Chip.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, this is my second go around doing a Zoom class. And I want to say what I said before. Thank you all for coming. I'm really grateful. And a disclaimer, if you feel like at the end of this that you didn't get your money's worth, I am more than happy to make it right. My email's going to be in a slide and Kristen's going to send out my email. So do not hesitate to contact me. A little bit more about me. I went to Cal Poly Pomona and I studied plant science there. And I've been at CalBG for 3 years in October. And I take care of the east side of the front of the garden, the East Alluvial Gardens. We call it the SoCal Gardens now, but it has desert beds, demonstration gardens, riparian areas, Channel Islands areas, and the Tongva Village area of the garden. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Summer care for California natives can be a stressful time. So we're gonna try to make everybody feel more comfortable today. So the main lecture overview is going to be planting techniques, watering techniques, pruning and general maintenance. And then we're going to do some plant selection slides and habitat gardening slides. And then at the end, we're going to show you some references that I use all the time that are available on the internet, things like that. So planting season is usually around October to, you know, February, March. I mean, I know we didn't get a lot of rain, and we're going to talk about that too. But even though our nursery is closed, other nurseries are open and you can get plants. And it is possible to plant even in the heat of the summer, but you want to plant at your own risk. The main key with everything is to observe how your plants are doing. You can't just plant them and walk away. And that's kind of a myth about California natives, is they're just super easy. I don't care if it's if you get a plant at a box store nursery or at a native nursery, it needs that initial care that might even last, you know, months to, I'm even babying plants that I've had for a few years here. So my planting technique, you know, it's pretty basic, but there are some tips in here. You want to clear the ground of any, you know, sticks, leaves, debris, rocks. Dig the hole. A lot of people will say, you know, twice as wide and twice as deep. We kind of joke around here, if you could dig a hole the exact size of your pot, shove it in the ground, and then slightly push it down, leaving that 1 inch space for it to be above the ground, that would be the perfect situation. So you want to dig the hole, and then you want to, a step that people do miss is you want to water the hole. And that will show you, you know, how fast draining your soil is. We're going to talk about soil type in a bit, but always put water in the hole 1 or even 2 times. I say always put water in the hole unless it is actively raining, okay? And we planted in the rain. So you also want to make sure you don't get any leaves or sticks or any organic matter in that backfill that goes in, because you've all seen like a little like puddle of water and leaves and things like that, and it gets like nasty and gross. That's what's going to happen inside of that hole, and it's going to negatively affect the roots. So native soil only goes in the backfill. Don't put, you know, potting soil or anything like that in there. And then a really key point is plant the top of the root ball, the crown of the plant, about 1 inch above the ground, because it's going to settle over time as you water it. And then you backfill the soil in, and then make a water catch, or like a berm, like a little a berm around your plant. I see some people that, you know, with a 1 gallon pot, they'll make the berm really, really big, like a couple feet. I kind of make it, you know, I mean, bigger than the size of the pot or the root ball that you put in the ground, but a decent size, but not, I see really big circles around the plants. And then water it in well 2 or 3 times. The water catch is especially important if you're on a slope. It's really important. And over time, it will erode away. So as your plant is getting established, it'll kind of erode away and then become more natural with your landscape. But a water catch all the time is definitely a big thing that you need. So after you're planting, especially with the heat, we use shade cloth around here, even little pieces, you know, like a little 3x3, and make, you know, like a lean-to or an A-frame around your plant, especially on the western side, for if it's getting afternoon sun in the heat of the day. A little tip that I heard from my boss, Peter Evans, the director of horticulture, that he read, I believe on Las Bolitas, excuse me, was to place rocks, a stack of rocks by your new planting on the south side, because that'll help when it gets cool overnight. Those rocks will retain that the coolness, and when you water it, it will retain that moisture. And I do it to a lot of my plants, especially so I know where they are in the landscape, especially because we plant, you know, hundreds and hundreds of plants a year. So water 1 to 2 a week. Use a cage to deter animals. It can be hard to tell what an animal will eat. You know, you can get a big roll of chicken wire at the store. People ask me, what's our biggest, you know, is it bugs? What's the biggest problem we have with animals or insects? It's always the rabbits. So just keep that in mind. And look for positive plant health signs. Roots inform shoots and shoots inform roots. The plant hormones kind of work opposite each other. And if you're seeing shoot growth, that means the roots are growing. And that's a really good sign. You can't look underground. You don't know what's happening down there, but you can be rest assured if you're seeing new growth, new leaves coming out of the main stem, that or lateral growth, that's a really good sign. So we usually don't take questions this soon, but I'm going to go into watering techniques. So any specific planting questions? And if not, that's fine.
Yeah, not quite yet. It doesn't look like.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Do you use shade cloth only in the summer when you first planted?
I personally don't use a lot of shade cloth at all, but people do, especially out in the communities in the back of the garden where there's wide open spaces. They will put it in the summertime because, I mean, even a hotter day, let's say in the 90s in October, which is going to happen and happens a lot, that sun intensity is not as bad as, say, 90 degrees in July. So I would look at your plant, look for sign. We're going to talk about negative plant health signs, but if it's wilting soon, after you're watering it, definitely put that up. But we use shade cloth here.
Okay.
People wonder why, and it doesn't look that great, but you're definitely helping the plant in the long term, because when you buy plants from a nursery, that's in shade cloth or shade houses the entire time, pretty much.
Right. And then so I'm guessing maybe they're asking, what about container gardening? And so I'm wondering if that, I'm not sure what they're asking, if it's about planting a container garden at this time of year. Is that your question?
Yeah, a plant in a pot is always going to need more water than a plant in the ground that's able to, spread its roots in the ground. The nursery people here at the garden, they'll have to water the entire nursery, twice a week, so it's going to need more water. I mean, we're going to talk about, digging down in the soil and making sure the soil's moist. But yes, if it's in a container or even like a raised bed or something like that, that's kind of smaller, it's going to need more water, but we'll talk about that too.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, there's 2 more questions, but they're pertaining to watering. So I'm going to wait till after you kind of go over some of those topics and then address those.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so watering techniques, main points and takeaways, kind of like some truisms here. When you water, you want to prepare for what is coming, not for what has happened. Say it's really hot, high 90s into the hundreds for a couple days in a row. You say, oh, it was really, really hot. Let me water because of that. That's not correct. You want, look at your weather apps and things like that. You want to water for what is gonna happen, not for what has happened. Deep and infrequent watering, that is key. California native plants like infrequent watering. They like to dry out a little bit. And if all your plants, if you did all this work in the fall and the winter, just to have them die in the summer, then what are we doing? So this is the key time, and it is a stressful time, and it's stressful for a reason, because if you're hot outside, the plants are hot too. And I mentioned roots informing shoots and shoots informing roots in a previous slide, but it's very true that it's a really good way to see if your plants are doing well. Observe and look for patterns of positive plant health. If it's not wilting, you're in good shape. If it has gone through, if you planted it in the fall and it's grown and it's bloomed in the springtime and it's gone to seed right now, that's a really good thing. Not to say that it can't take a turn for the worse, but if it blooms and goes through that cycle, that means good things for your plants. So another takeaway is landscape quality plant specimens versus the natural habitat. Some people ask me, you guys seem to water a lot here at the garden. If you want to see the natural habitat and you go up in the mountains and kind of see some crispy fried plants, that's fine. But in your home landscape or botanic garden quality plants, it needs water, and not wasting water, but doing it water wise and being smart about it. And being confident and learning from your successes and mistakes is key. I too kill plants. Okay. I try not to do it because of neglect, but we just have so much going on here and we're experimenting too, and you're going to be experimenting in your landscape. So with the drought that we've only maybe had about 7 inches in Claremont. This is from 1951 to 1995. We have more rain data, but this is on the door of the horticulture building. So as you can see, say 78 to 79, 24 inches, that was last year and the year before where we got above average rain. And where we are right now is say 1960 to 61, 6.5 inches. So you can see the massive sways. And I was looking, 77 to 78, 45 inches of rain. Look at that. Or 91, and I wish I could go back to 91, 92. 43 inches of rain. So that just gives you an idea of what we do go through here in Southern California. So some main topics of watering techniques: native versus non-native plants, sun exposure and soil type, new versus established, long-term watering schedules, and then different irrigation systems, and then talk about summer dormancy. So, why native plants? So non-natives and acclimation to Mediterranean climate, that you see a lot, East Coast plant palettes or Midwestern plant palettes in California, and they can acclimate, they can in a way, but you're always going to talk about more water use. And then non-natives that are from other Mediterranean climates. So if you look at a globe, around the 30th parallel in the northern and southern hemisphere, on the southwestern side of continents, you will have this Mediterranean or chaparral climate, dry, hot summers, cool, wet winters. And that happens, coastal California, central Chile, the Mediterranean, the Cape Province of South Africa, and South and Southwest Australia. And nice looking plants do come from these areas, and it's not a terrible thing to have these in your landscapes. And then California natives in non-native regions. I'm going to show you a map in the next slide, but that's also something to take into account. If you have plants that are from, Northern California coast, and they're coming to Southern California inland in this area, you have to think about that acclimation and integration into our landscapes. And it's doable. I mean, at the garden, it's our profession to take care of these plants full time, but we have plants from all over the state, and we can make it work and find out their needs. And native plants and water saving plant physiology. So California natives can go dormant, lose their leaves, go summer deciduous. At the garden, we kind of think of that as something we don't want to happen. So we water those plants more to stop that from happening, but it does happen. I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming slide. And then you have water saving techniques in plants like this Artemisia here on the left, small leaf, kind of that silvery green. You'll have a thick waxy cuticle, which is the layer on the leaf, and plant oils and things like that help to stop water loss. So the whole point here is, have the right plant in the right place. California natives are for California. Native plants need water too. Plus up your plants with care. They're going to grow faster. They're going to produce more seed. They're going to be healthier. They're going to have deeper roots. So it's okay to baby your natives. So a natural distribution map here from CalScape, which is a huge resource for people. Use it. So see this Ribes indicorum on the left, it's all the yellow is where it's found, and the dots, Southern California coast and inland, versus on the right, this Ribes munzii, the canyon gooseberry, not in Southern California, but all up the northern coast. So that just shows you that although the plants can acclimate, if you're not 100% sure about how much care you can give it, if somebody was brand new to it and they had a choice, I would say get the Ribes indicorum on the left, and if you were in Southern California, because you can just see where their natural distribution is. Another one here, Ariagonum Fasciculatum, you see it all the time. California buckwheat, all in Southern California, everywhere, going up to San Francisco. Ariagonum arborescens, another beautiful plant that's blooming right now. Santa Cruz Island buckwheat, just on that Santa Barbara coast and on the Channel Islands. So that just goes to show you where they naturally occur, and taking that into mind, especially when you start to get into the heat of the summer here. So sun exposure, soil type, and plant stress. I think we kind of all understand what full sun, part sun, full shade is. 8 hours a day of full sun versus, 4 to 6 part sun, 2 hours or less full shade, or in, oak canopy or something like that, dappled light. And then, your northeast, southwest facing, southwestern exposure. You're going to get that afternoon sun. In the east, if you had a plant that was maybe part shade, if you can get it to face east, so it's just getting that less intense morning sun. And the sun intensity at different times of year, I mentioned this before, the heat in July of a 95-degree day is going to be different than in October because of where the sun orientation is in the sky. So different soil types. Like I said before, if you're not sure, dig a little hole, fill it with water. I have had times where it'll take an hour to drain, an hour plus. That's clay soil. It has more pores to hold the water versus a sandy, fast draining soil. And these California native plant websites, it'll tell you right off the bat, how tall it's going to get, how much water it needs, what kind of soil it likes. That's like the main things, the main points. So what does properly watered soil feel like? Get a trowel or a shovel and dig down. Don't trust that first couple inches. That's going to dry out way faster than, a deep watering. It's going to, the field capacity of the soil, it's going to push that down into the soil. I'll take a sharpshooter shovel, which is kind of a long, thin shovel, after I water, and I'll walk around the area and just stick the shovel on the top of the soil, jump on it, and see if it'll, whoosh, just go right down in, kind of like cutting a piece of cake. That's what you're looking for there, just going right down in there. And if you can dig down a little bit and create, it's called a ped. If the soil will compact in your hand, it might not, water might not run out of there, but that's going to show you that there is moisture in the soil. And moist soil is cool. It has coolness to it. So stressed, unhealthy, dying looking plants, obviously wilting. If they get burned, the leaf margins will dry out. What you're looking for is turgor pressure in the plant, or turgidity, where the cells are full of moisture, upright, not wilting. And then if you let it dry out, if you let that root ball dry out, it's going to eventually reach the permanent wilting point, which there's no coming back from that. That's when the water elements inside the plant, it's called a cavitation. They will collapse, and there's no coming back from that. Dead plant tissue is dead. So new versus established, kind of all depends on how long a plant can become healthy and established. Say a sage or a buckwheat, you throw it in the ground in December, and it's doing really well by summertime, and you really don't have to think about it much other than the pruning and horticultural care. Other plants, I still am looking out for plants that have been in the ground for 2 years. So new plants watered about once a week with that water catch, once a week for about 6 weeks. Don't let the root ball dry out. Look for new growth. Established plants, we're going to get more into this 1 to 2 times per month, especially in this part of California. And do your research and trust your observational skills. You're going to have to be the scientist and the plant and the horticulturist to trust your instincts and what's happening at your site in your landscape. So watering new plants versus watering the area as a whole, that water catch that you have, that you're gonna water plants specifically, kind of solo watering them, you have to water the entire area at some point soon as you're watering it specifically, because if you're just watering that water catch, the dry soil around is just going to wick that water away and not keep the moisture in as long as it could. You also want to let plants dry out a bit. The water that goes into the soil, that the roots can only take up nutrients that is in a water solution, okay? But the soil also wants to dry out, so the oxygen in the pores of the soil, the roots take up that oxygen as well. And wet feet, that usually leads to, you know, a plant that's overwatered, you know, it'll get mushy, the crown will get kind of mushy, you know, you get like black on it. The majority of California native plants do not like wet feet. So long-term watering schedules, a naturalized California native really gets no water at all other than natural precipitation, you know, truly drought tolerant. Most established plants get water once a month here at the garden. I'm going to talk about this with irrigation systems, but get about once a month. Irrigate in fall and winter and drought years, which is going on right now. 2 times a month, where plants, their natural distribution is in more moist conditions on the coast or central Northern California. Many of your popular cultivars fall into this category. 4 times a month or once a week, a lot of shade plants, riparian plants that are native to, you know, stream beds and things like that, and natives from high rainfall areas. Try to group these plants together. And Kristen made this point to me, so I'm adding as a really good point. If you have something, you know, that you want to be really drought tolerant versus something that's from a more moist condition that's kind of close together, split the difference. Or, you know, you can also isolate the plant that is in a more moist condition and water that water, or, you know, hand water that and leave the other one alone. But you can also split the difference where, you know, twice a month, you know, versus 1 time a month, you know, once every 3 weeks. So different irrigation systems here. So, you know, fixed or hardwire in ground. We have these in certain parts of the garden. The only drawback is, I mean, the pipes are underground. And if something goes wrong, if a little rock gets into the valve and you don't know what you're doing, it can be really hard and expensive to get it fixed. Not that irrigation people, hire irrigation people to make sure your irrigation system's working well, but it can be trouble, and it needs the correct heads to work correctly. That's a bad sentence, but you know, it's not different heads, you know, something that, you know, maybe more a shrub head, a bubbler, or something that's just shooting a couple feet versus one that, you know, shoots 15 feet at 360 degrees. So drip and micro, we have some of these at the garden. They're good for small areas, say little planters, can lead to overwatering. A lot of times, a lot of people, it's always their Ceanothus died. Well, do you have drip? Yes, I have drip. Make sure that it's not running too long. They'll come back a few weeks and say, yeah, I brought somebody over to my house and there was a leak or something. And drip and micro is fine. But this third bullet point here, a portable rotor sprinkler. This is my bread and butter here on this portable rotor. These are my babies. I have about 20 of these. So I make this little couple feet, picture on the left, hose going to this stand that you can buy online, and then this riser to a rotor. This would normally be buried pretty much underground in your landscape. And I have a 4.5 gallon per minute nozzles in here. And I water most of my plants every 3 weeks to a month at 4.5 gallons a minute for 4 hours. It's going to sound like a lot, but that's about 1,000 gallons in 4 hours. But if you think about it, with deep and infrequent watering, in one time of watering at 4 hours, that could be 1 hour per week. But I smush it all into one event so I can get that deep and infrequent watering. This is what I suggest. I mean, it's doable. Email me, we'll get you set up with one of these. Hand watering. Nothing beats hand watering your plants. It's the best way to observe and see exactly what's happening in your garden. Get out there with, if you're trying to make a landscape so you can hang out there on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, get out there with a hose and a water breaker sprinkler head. So summer dormancy, like I was speaking about before, some plants will naturally, lose their leaves or, look pretty dried out. You can reverse it, but that's going to take more work. Some examples of summer dormancy: Kekiella, ribes species, Asculus californica, buckeyes. Buckeyes are the first ones to lose their leaves. And people will say, this plant need more water. No, it's going to lose its leaves pretty much no matter what. Diplicus won't look great. Monkey flowers won't look great in the summertime. Clematis look dead. Quercus angleminii, an Engelmann oak, will start to lose its leaves if it gets too dry. And it's amazing. I'll put a rotor, a portable rotor on an Engelmann oak that's losing its leaves. And it's crazy. Within a week, it's already sends out new shoots. So do not purposely water coast live oak in the summertime. Soil pathogens that cause sudden oak death, they like wet and warm. Sometimes, and most of the time, if your plants are underneath oaks, it's impossible not to water them. But don't purposely try to deep water a coast live oak in the summertime, because that is when they're dormant. Ceanothus, don't overwater in the summer. And into the fall, don't overwater. Root rot fungus present in the soil will kill Ceanothus fast. Drip systems in Ceanothus, like I mentioned before, I've seen multiple times over the years, people having trouble with that. Fremontodendron or flannel bush, don't overwater in the summertime, known to die extremely fast from soil pathogens. And when I say fast, I mean fast, like a few days. So these are pictures at the garden from the past few weeks. This Diplicus on the left, in a little more shade, probably in a little more loamy soil where it's keeping a little more moisture. This one on the right out in the communities, losing its leaf, drying out, not looking good. This Kekiella, these are on the mesa, 2 different plots. This one on the left is getting a little more water, but it's still yellowing and it's going to lose more of its leaves. But the horticulturist who works up there is trying her best to keep it from going super dormant, like this picture on the right. But these plants will come back. That's the whole point. They're not dead. This ribes speciosum down here on the left, this is how it would look in the fall and the winter. And then on the right, looks dead. Another thing, a way to kind of tell is if the twig doesn't just snap, if it has a little bit of flexibility to it, that still means there's life in it. Or you can, take your thumb or like a little knife and scrape the stem. And if there's green in there, that means it's still alive. This Asculus bottom right, the California buckeye, looks amazing on the left-hand side. This is a couple months ago. And then on the right, yellowing, it's going to lose all its leaves. So just keep that in mind with these types of plants. If 1, you want that in your landscape, and 2, to expect this, and that there's not a whole lot to do to keep it from going this route. So Dr. Lenz and John Durley, a lot of times I quote, and this is on my last slide, the book, California Native Trees and Shrubs by Lenz and Durley from 1981. These are a couple quotes that I just wanted to point out. After establishment, the plants can survive with only natural precipitation. Although growth is more rapid, plants look better and seed production is increased if they do receive some additional water. And this is talking about jojoba, which can really take the drought, but additional water. The second one, at Claremont, it has done best when planted in very loam and watered about every 2 weeks during the summer. This is talking about Arctocephalus Munzee, which is native to Little Sur and Big Sur, up the coast where it's cooler, extra summer water. The last one, the species has done well at Claremont, where it has been grown in well-drained soil and given deep irrigation about every 4 weeks, so once a month in the summer. That's pretty much what we do around here all the time. That's for Arctocephalus elegans. Yeah, if we could, I'm going to go to pruning techniques next. We could stop for questions if we want.
Yeah, there's a few questions. So you kind of addressed some of this, I think, after the question was asked, but I'll just for clarity's sake. One of our class participants, they have a 3-foot Ceanothus Ray Hartman that they planted in the fall.
Okay.
And so far they've been watering it once a week. How often should they water it in the summer?
If it's healthy and it's sending out some new growth, you said once a week?
They were watering it once a week, yeah.
I think once a week might be a little too much. In the heat of the summer, especially with new and older Ceanothus, you'll notice some older leaves, yellowing and possibly dropping. That is natural. I would rather have you possibly not neglect, but hold back on the water, especially on a Ceanothus, than do more. You might be killing it with a little too much kindness, but I don't have a whole bunch of Ceanothus in my area. Mine main grouping is on a slope, so the water is gonna run a little bit more. That's about once every 3 weeks, a good deep watering. Once a week might be a little too much. I don't know exactly the situation your Ceanothus is in, but I would say that's maybe a little too much.
Okay.
Too much water.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, and so another question is, they just bought a woolly blue curls. So they're wondering should they water it? It says to avoid summer watering.
We're going to talk about woolly blue curls in a couple slides, but and some tips on how to pruning and watering Trichostima lanatum or woolly blue curls go together. That's what I've found. I water mine. I have a soaker hose on one grouping that I hit about once a week. I also rotor them every 3 weeks in another section. I don't know. We're going to talk about woolly blue curls more, and I have examples of pictures and then of the horticultural care. But ours that get more water look really nice.
Okay.
So not that I'm going against that somebody's recommendation, but I'll show you. I'll give you some examples coming up.
And then there's a question asking if you could elaborate on watering new plants versus the area as a whole. I think that was when you were mentioning the wicking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when the water berm, that's going to keep that water in, let's say a 1 gallon Trichostima or woolly blue curls that we just mentioned. If you're just watering that specific plant, that, say 2 foot by 2 foot water catch, that water and the surrounding soil is dry, the moisture level is going to move from a high concentration to a low concentration. So that surrounding soil is going to pull that moisture away. So initially, when it's a brand new plant and you're isolating it with more water than the surrounding area, also water the surrounding area, not once a week like you're doing isolating the plants, but you want to create an environment of moisture, not just in that one where your 1 gallon pot is sitting in the ground.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hope that helped.
And then so someone has a plant that it's not blooming the way it should, but it looks very healthy. Okay. Is it better to try something else? I'm assuming they mean like another plant in that zone, or
if it's healthy overall, like say the leaves look healthy, or it has nice form, or it's compact and it's not blooming the way it should. We're going to talk about pruning coming up, but if it was my plant at the garden, I would maybe deadhead it a little bit and take off some of those leading stems to, one, create more compact lateral growth, which will help it to want to send up those main leaders, or the apical meristem is the technical term, to hopefully get it to bloom. But if it's not blooming for you, focus on the good things of trying to get more leaf growth and lateral growth and but I know what you mean. I have plants that, you think they'd be blooming at this time and they're just not.
Yeah. Okay. We'll just do two more real quick. So do you water your monkey flowers, or do you just kind of let them go dormant in the summer?
Yeah. In the back, let's say in the communities, which is not my area, a lot of those they'll let go dormant, that were just a few weeks ago or over the past 2 months looking amazing. Since my section is in the very front of the garden, I have a bed of Diplicus, sticky monkey flower, right in the opening of the garden under a lot of shade of a redshanks, adenostoma. And I give that extra water to keep it leafed out and to keep it blooming, because they will look extremely dead, so dead that you'll want to pull them out of the ground. And that's a case, breaking summer dormancy for effect in your landscape. That's kind of part of the deal of, if you're fine with that, them looking bad and dried out, some people, to save water, don't mind when their landscape and some of the plants go dormant like that. But more water will definitely help, and more shade in the initial planting scheme will help your monkey flower to stay green.
Cool. Okay.
But don't surprise if some of it, it's not going to look like this lush green everything, in the heat of the summer. So expect some of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Gotcha. So last one before we move on, and then we'll have more question time a little bit later. But this person has a lot of sage in their yard, and it's been there for years. It's very colorful in the spring, but tends to gray out all summer. Is that just natural, or is there anything they can do to generate more color in the summer?
Definitely natural. If you go up in the foothills and see sage up there, or buckwheat, very dried out, the leaf orientations will change, will look like it's in bad shape. More water. Also, we're going to talk about pruning and things like that. Deadheading your sages will help that basal lateral growth not associated with the bloom to suck up water and to be healthier. And more water, not wasting it. I mean, I don't want to say just water, but observe your plants, keep an eye on them, and come to the garden and I'll show you examples of mine. Some of them that look really good, and some of them that don't. That's something that I should have mentioned in the beginning. Come to the garden and we can chat about anything.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks, Chip.
Hey, no problem. So now we're going to talk about pruning and general maintenance. I don't know, instead of just going through this one, I have slides. You know what, the first one I will though. So best management practices, that should be BMPs, not BPMs. Clean quality tools help for clean quality plants. Clean your tools after you use them. Alcohol is best. A bleach to water solution of 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. The only thing, the bleach, if you have it in a spray bottle or something like that, its effectiveness won't last over time. I know alcohol has been hard to get over the pandemic, but a horticulturist's best friend is definitely a bottle of alcohol. We're going to talk about pruning techniques, what to prune and what not to prune, and other tasks, and experiment and trust your instincts. That's key. What some person has experienced in their garden versus you become a fine gardener. You can become a gardener yourself with confidence. So deadheading, removing spent flowers to encourage compact growth habit and a possible second bloom. Cutting it right there. This picture, it's not the best in the world, but if you come down this stem, you see this flower too, I would actually cut it down here. So that's one pruning technique. Heading back. So cutting back a lot of the leaders. I don't love this picture. I wish this really trunk, it looks like it's a tree. Think about it as kind of a little bush. Helps to rein in overgrowth. Again, keep a compact form. Coppicing is cutting a plant back to the ground about 4 to 6 inches. Like you keep the roots intact while rejuvenating the plant. So the hormones that create shoots actually start in the roots. So if you coppice that, and I'll give examples of what kind of plants to coppice, there's going to be a lot of energy in the roots that want to send back up into the shoots and to keep a plant, again, reined in. Thinning, removing overgrown internal plant structure to open up and improve plant form. That's kind of like selective pruning, the next one. Removing incorrect growth, you know, say a twig or a stick is going the wrong way. Sometimes you have no choice but to prune. A plant can be growing in a pathway, growing into each other. Something falls down. You have no choice sometimes. And that gets back into the experimentation and experiences with your own plants, which is key to becoming really familiar with how to take care of these plants. Then also a pruning technique with an axe, okay, is removal, taking out a plant. I put that in the category of pruning the entire plant out of the ground. So this sheet right here, this is in the Hort building on the wall, kind of gives you an idea. It's definitely not everything, but Salvia and sages deadhead the flower stalk to promote lateral, more compact growth. I'll have a picture of Salvia in the next slide. A lot of times it'll show you where to cut. In Celia, coppice it to promote second bloom. We're going to get into some plant profiles about that. This is important. Arctostaphylos, use selective pruning and dead branch removal in the summertime when you're not going to water in like the next week or two, because plant pathogens that promote Arctostaphylos branch dieback, they like warm and wet, you know. Trichostoma, deadhead flowers after they're going to seed, and don't cut back, don't head them back or cut them back too far. Just deadhead the flower stalks. And when you prune them, then water them, and you will see, I promise you, you will see the health of the plant bounce back. We talked about Diplochus before. It looks really bad. You might want to say, oh, I just want to cut it back to the ground. So, you know, maybe I can help rejuvenate it, or it won't look bad in my landscape. Do not cut back monkey flower. You'll kill it when normally it would look dead and then come back. You're gonna probably kill it if you coppice it or really cut it back hard. Heavy pruning of Ceanothus drastically cuts down on flowering. In the Lenz and Durley book, which is going to be in the last slide, they say do not cut back, if you can, a Ceanothus anything thicker than the thickness of a pencil. Okay, don't cut back too hard into that. And Quercus agrifolia, you can in their dormant season, this is when you want to prune them. Sometimes you have no choice, and other times of the year. But yeah, this isn't a complete list. And information on other species is readily available. But you can see here, you have the summer plants, Arctostaphylos, Ceanothus, Ribes, Salvia, you know, summer into autumn, evergreen oaks. So this is kind of a nice little a pruning calendar. So pruning and maintenance. See the Salvia apiana? Okay, so on the top left, so this flower stalk has gone to seed and it's naturally wanting to die back, okay? And you can see all these little new leaves coming out. It's begging you to prune that down to where these new leaves are. So the bottom slide is just close up on that. Cut it back to where this are. You might be cutting back your plants a lot, but you need to get rid of that flower stalk. So the woolly blue curls, so the top one, these are not the same plant, but the one on top, it's in full sun, gets water once every 3 weeks, but it's still in flower. Whereas the one on the bottom, it's gone to seed already. And you can kind of see these leaves. The leaf orientation is pointed down. It looks like it needs a lot of help. What it wants you to do is prune it and then water it. And I promise you, it will perk back up. Okay, so weeding, obviously weed your garden. Weeding versus natural seedlings. Weeds are water thieves. Natural seedlings, if that's what you know, say a Ceanothus seedling comes up, that's what you want. That's the main goal of getting California natives into your landscape is you want these plants to take over and have the birds and the animals spread them. Mulching helps retain moisture, cools down the roots, and suppresses weeds. I was pretty anti-mulch when I first started working here because I thought it took away from the, the natural look. But now I'm 100% on board of mulching. The dead of summer when it's really hot isn't really the best time to mulch, because if you forget to keep it moist, that mulch will get really hot. Best time to do it, spring or fall. But it's doable if you just mulch it and really water it in. So another thing that washing off your plants, spraying with a hose or like an atomized sprayer. There's a thing called a Foggit sprayer that cleaning the debris on the dust off of the leaf plane is good for the plants. I'm definitely convinced of this, because if you're clogging all the pores and the gas exchange elements, the stomata on the underside of the leaf, there are things called hydrothodes that are on the leaf margin or the edge of the leaf that exchange gases. If those get clogged with little debris, your plant isn't going to be as healthy. So, it's going to make your garden look better by getting the dust and the dirt off of it. And it's also going to help the plant. And I couldn't leave the 3-point cut out. I call it the under over. If you're ever, so CB, if you were to just cut that right there, the fear is, and it will happen, is that will tear all the way down and hurt that there at point C. So under the first cut through, and then cut it off at that notch right there. So a note on anecdotes and personal plant experience. I was talking to Kristen about this before the talk. People will say, well, I do this at my house, or, say I planted a salvia and I've only watered it 2 times in 6 months and it's totally fine. That's wonderful. Keep doing that. That's your experimentation and your experience. Somebody else's house, you don't know what kind of soil type, sun exposure they're dealing with. So just take that into account, that, you have trusting your own instincts. And this is the last one on pruning, but Ashley Armstrong, our grounds manager, she did a class on pruning a while back that's on the CalBG site. So we will take some questions and then get into the last part, which is some plant profiles for your garden.
All right, so great. So you kind of went over this, but I think it may depend on the plant, but this person was saying they were under the impression that pruning and coppicing should be done mostly in fall. So is it okay to cut back somewhat severely in summer when it gets so hot?
That's a really good point, especially when it comes to coppicing. I really kind of only mentioned coppicing with Encelia California, or Encelia farinosa. And the other, what's the other one? It's on another slide. I'm sorry, it's out of my mind right now. But if you, Encelia some of them are coming into bloom, some of them are finished blooming. Instead of just deadheading them, because they tend to get really lanky after they've gone to seed, I will cut them down to about 6 inches above the ground, and then I will water them. And it's amazing to see all that new growth start to pop out. But the person who asked this question, that's a very good question. Yeah, coppicing normally in the fall, spring, deadheading, especially things like salvia, that they're really wanting you to deadhead them. And I would definitely do that after, the birds have come and picked the seeds and things like that. But that is correct, what that person is saying.
So it seems kind of like plant dependent, like when you should be pruning.
Plant dependent, and when it is blooming, the things that bloomed in the springtime, if they've gone to seed and everything like that, which most of them have, they have already wanted you to deadhead them. But something like salvia, we're going to talk about Ariagonum and things like that, buckwheat. But yeah, summer blooming, if they've gone to seed and you start to see that lateral growth, kind of doing the plant a favor. If it's telling you, take the plant's advice, because it'll show you, right. It's wanting to be cut.
Okay, thanks.
So that's kind of a weird answer.
No, that's good. So in terms of, this person has Allen chickering sage, and it's become very, very large. How far can they prune? Like, you know, would you say a third of the stems, a half of the stems? Is there a sort of rule of how much you can prune?
You don't want to cut, I mean, I'm not sure how big it is. Like, let's say it's 3 by 3 or, you know, something like that. You don't want to cut too far back into that older growth from a couple years before, but you know, taking off, you know, with sages, you know, the flower stalk is definitely gone. Okay. And then cut, yeah, back into it a third. I mean, the only thing is when you start cutting back into that woody material, you know, that's the older growth. If you want to keep it compact or rein it in to, you know, a 2 by 2 or something like that, we have some baby Allen chickerings that look amazing that are like 2 feet by 2 feet, reining it back into that. But if you get back into that woody material, it's going to slow down its growth versus the herbaceous material, the newer growth. But if you have to cut it back, do it. I mean, depending on the limitations of your landscape, like you're not going to kill I highly doubt you're going to kill the plant. It's not like how I said a monkey flower, cutting it back too far will kill it. And also trichostoma, I mentioned, you know, don't cut back trichostoma too far. It negatively affects it. But I mean, sages are survivors. You know, they can take what you throw at them.
Okay. So last one before we move on. This person had a beautiful stalks of showy penstemon, but now the flower has faded. Should they cut back the stalk at this point?
Yes, that's another one. I don't have a lot of penstemon, so that's a penstemon spectabilis. I don't have a lot of penstemon in my area. A lot of it's in the back. Evan, who works with a lot of it in the back, when it goes to seed, he'll strip the seed off the stalk, throw the seed so volunteer vegetation will come up. And then we'll either pull the penstemon all together, or again, kind of with the sage, or not kind of, but like with the sage, when that flower stalk is finished and starts dying back, you'll see some lateral nodes, you know, closer to the ground, sending out some lateral shoots. You know, I mean, I know this picture of this 3-point cut, you know, it looks like a big tree, but, you know, cut the flower stalk off there, you know, maybe a little bit lower, but you'll be seeing new growth right here in this node wanting to come out. So, I mean, we kind of treat showy penstemon not as a weed, but we have to get rid of it after it's gone to seed, because we have, you know, thousands of volunteer vegetation plants that come up. But look for those little lateral shoots and snip it down to that to encourage it to, I mean, probably not, you're not going to get a second bloom out of it, but hopefully it'll bush back out for you.
Great, thank you.
Yep. We good to move on?
Yeah, I think we can move on now. Okay. Thank you.
So this is going to be the last section here. So although the blooming season is almost over, many native plants can provide summer blooms. Plants that have bloomed in the spring are now providing seeds and berries for animals. There's still tons of Arctostaphylos fruit, Manzanita fruit on the Manzanitas, Ceanothus, California lilac, lots of seeds on them for the birds and animals. Ariagonum or buckwheat either have blooms or they'll hold on to the blooms for a really long time. Frangula or coffee berries right now all over the garden have big old fruit on them. The ribes or the currants around the garden had amazing fruit this year. Maybe I was paying more attention than I did in the previous years, but all of this stuff, especially the ribes, had a lot of fruit, which is a really good thing. Helianthus, or, you know, your coast sunflowers, you know, they'll always provide seeds for birds. Encelia and Baelia, birds like that. I always see finches on my Baelia, which is a little wildflower. And bloom time and duration, they're not set in stone, but proper care and extra water will help to extend this time. And I mentioned this before, but if your plant went through a bloom cycle, that's a very good thing. Keep doing what you're doing. So some of these slides, admittedly, are from my last talk, and I kind of recycled them a little bit, not all of them, and I added new things. But even though this Toyon, Heteromeles arborifolia, gets really big, I'm sorry I don't have the sizing in here. I'd say about 15 by 15, but again, with your pruning techniques, you can try to keep these plants smaller. They're going into flower right now, and then they have berries in the fall. They're naturally throughout California, except the deserts, vital food source for birds in the wintertime. Can definitely naturalize where you don't have to water them hardly at all. The field station, the Bernard Field Station is right next to us to the east, and there's Toyon there that, I mean, they get no water at all, and they're very, very healthy. And this cultivar or cultivated variety has yellow fruits, Davis Gold, which I've seen available. So your buckwheats here, California buckwheat, Ariagonum Fasciculatum. This is what you see all over the foothills. It is going into flower right now. So that's, I mean, I know it's super common, but it's beautiful right now all over the garden. St. Catherine's lace or Ariogonum gigantea. These are also going into flower right now, 6 by 6. And you can deadhead them. But especially as into the fall, if they're holding on to those blooms, which they will, some people like to leave the blooms on to kind of let them dry out. And they look really, the form is really cool and structurally it's nice. And it gives a lot more time for the birds and things like that to pick the seeds. And with a lot of these buckwheats, you know what, I want to just focus on this California buckwheat. When it's it goes from this kind of white pinkish flower, it's called rusting, where it gets kind of brownish red over time. I've found that the pruning care for it, you don't have to come through and like shear it or cut each little individual bloom off. It's pretty wild. It'll hang onto its blooms for a long time. And when it's ready to bloom again, the plant hormones in the plants will cut off that stem to that bloom. And it's like when the next blooms come along, the old blooms just like fall off. And it's pretty cool. Some other species here, red flowered buckwheat. This is Ariagonum, which one is this? Grande var rubescens. This is a more coastal variety, but we have it in a little more shady areas here in the garden. The color is really nice. See, with these different buckwheats, you can get different color combos. Sulfur buckwheat, Ariagonum Umbulatum. So 2 foot high, 3 foot wide, so a little bit smaller. Ashy leaf buckwheat, this is probably my favorite one. Ariagonum cinereum. It will spread, but you can keep it reined in like that. Saffron buckwheat, Ariagonum crocatum. Smaller, nice, super cool. 1 foot high, 2 foot wide. Rare and unique. So you can see all these colors just with this one genera of plants, buckwheat. So your sages, I'm not going to read all of this. Great for hummingbirds and bees. They love the flowers. Birds eat the seeds. Blooms spring through fall. Very aromatic, almost to a fault. Like white sage can, woo, you work with that for hours on end like I do here. Yeah. Black. So we mentioned white sage and black sage, how they're doing right now with the with people that are listening and watching, doing well. For about 5 by 5 with both of these. Cleveland sage, Salvia clevelandii, beautiful color. So like different purples and pinks here with the purple sage that spreads more. Salvia leucophylla 4 by 10. Somebody mentioned that the hummingbird sage, Salvia spathacia, is doing well. The more shade, the better with these. And like how we were talking about pruning techniques, once on this Salvia spathacia, once this is gone to seed, it looks kind of bad. Come in, cut this all out, cut the flower stalks out, and it will begin to grow and spread and regenerate. Salvia Munzee, the Munzee sage, 3x3. You can just see all these different colors here. More sage cultivars. Alan Chickering was mentioned before. Terra Seca, which is a cultivar of black sage, Salvia mellifera. Spreading, I really like it. We have it at the garden. I only became aware of it over the past year or so. Dar's Gold on the bottom left and Mrs. Beard on the bottom right. These are all beautiful, and you have different growth habits, more upright, more creeping, crawling on the ground. So coffee berries, this Frangula Eve Case, this one in the middle is probably going to be best for anybody if you can, and it is available right now all over the garden. It looks just like this. It has all these fruits, all these berries on it. It does have inconspicuous flowers in the spring and summer, but the bees definitely find it. And Celia, we were talking about coppicing this. That's how I treat it. So, I mean, so this one on the left, you could shear this back into, like a half circle to cut all this off. I would honestly, just to keep, because it spreads and goes to seed a lot, I would coppice it. I would do it. I would bring it all the way down to about 6 inches above the ground. The one on the right, Encelia californica, I would go with the one on the left if you can find it. More beautiful flower color, kind of a silvery green. More summer bloomers, Butylon palmeri, blooming right now. Evan Green did a class on butterflies, I think 2 weeks ago. Asclepius, there are more species than just these two, but they're blooming right now. This one, we have some Scalpia Subulata. It's a desert milkweed or skeleton milkweed out in the back, out in the communities. And the tarantula hawk wasps love this. And I counted 4 the other day at one time. And they're not aggressive. I mean, obviously, if you keep your distance, but they're really cool to look at. And yeah, hosts for monarch butterflies and different butterfly species. But yeah, watch Evan's class. I watched it. And it's super informative. More summer bloomers, Aqualegia formosa, Western Columbine, definitely more shady area. Gets regular watering. Mine's on a watering system. It's about once a week for, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours. After the flowers have gone past their bloom, you'll notice it'll want to die back. I coppice these pretty hard. You'll notice if you pull away the leaves after it's gone to flower, you'll see a lot of new growth coming out. Cut that back. Monardella to reinvigorate growth and promote new growth. Monardella is blooming right now. Coyote mint smells great. So trichostoma. There are different color forms out there that you'll find. Some like pinkish, purple, some that are just pure white, whitish blue. It's really cool, the different mutations that you see in the wild and at the garden. But after this, you'll notice right away, after this has gone to seed on this trichostoma, it'll change color. It'll kind of go gray, grayish brown. Just cut right back to where that bloom stops and then water it. And I promise you, it will perk back up. Epilobium, I haven't noticed that much of it blooming like crazy right now, but when it does in the summertime, and it's pretty spectacular. Calapsus, desert willow. Only thing about these is they get really big and they grow really fast. But right now in the garden, just thousands of these blooms on every plant. A more shady spot summer bloomer. They're kind of done blooming. It was more in June, but Philadelphus lewisii does go deciduous in the fall. Fragrant white flowers. Mine are pretty much in full shade. Water twice a month, 5x5. You can get a little lanky. I don't really cut them back that much because they're on a slope, but when they are in flower, they definitely catch your eye, and the visitors that come to the garden catch their eye. So oaks, great shade trees. Say the one in the middle, Quercus chrysolepis, get really big, and the Engelmann oak. I'm sorry, I don't have these heights and widths. So chrysolepis, 30x30. Quercus engelmannii, smaller, but on the left here, this scrub oak, Quercus berber, anything that's a scrub oak that you can find, they stay smaller. under 15 feet, but they do have tooth leaves and they can be very painful. But birds use them for all different reasons, but they give shade to your plants, which is definitely key. And just make sure that you don't purposely try to water your coast live oak in the summertime. So a good start for your own native garden is at least one species in the following genera. Have a manzanita, a lilac, a buckwheat, a coffeeberry, a currant, a beard tongue, a sage, or an oak. And I mean, a lot of these for a 1 gallon plant, $10, $15, maybe some of the manzanita, slower growing plants are going to be more for a 1 gallon. But for, $100, you can get to have a well-rounded garden. And using a combination of these plants, you can layer them to have various species in a small space. So you have a smaller, a creeping plant as a ground cover in the foreground, a medium shrub in the midground, or a large shrub in the background. Before I go to the very last one, Kristen, maybe we could, some people had any questions on specific plants? And by no means is this everything, but, buckwheats and sages, those are your heat of the summer ones that are gonna look nice for you.
Yeah. Well, so there's a question about lemonade berry, if they could successfully transplant a fairly small 2-year-old lemonade berry.
Okay. One thing about my time here at the garden is I have not pulled a lot of plants out of the ground. That's my one drawback. A lot of times, I've had to move some plants because I've had to. My boss has said, we really need to move this over there. But it was only in the ground for a couple weeks or something like that. So it just came right out with its root ball still pretty much intact. If you're going, I don't care how big, let's say your lemonade berry after 2 years, you're going to want to cut it back pretty hard. Because when you tear it out of the ground and you upset those roots, they're not going to, you upset those root hairs and shear those off, it's not going to want to take up water. So the less above ground leaves and things like that are transferring water and gas, the less, the better, because it's going to be in a stressed out mode. Like I said, transplanting and pulling California natives out of the ground it's just not kind of what we do here. But definitely cut it back if you're going to pull it. Cut it back just to a couple feet or less. 2 by 2. I don't know how big it is. The one thing about Rhus integrifolia, lemonade berry, they're extremely tough plants. They're very tough, so they might be able to take that. But at the same time, we look at something like bougainvillea, non-native, obviously. Super strong, drought tolerant plant. But if you start messing with the roots, even if you have a 1 gallon bougainvillea and you mess with those roots, like that's its Achilles heel. So I just don't have a lot of experience with that. And I do apologize. And I hope it goes well. But cut it back, cut it back. Yeah. And the minute, say you replant it, maybe hold back on the watering right away. But if you see after a little time goes by, or maybe a lot of time goes by, the plant doesn't fully die, that's a very good sign if it doesn't die. But if it starts to send out some lateral shoots, that lets you know that the roots have taken back to some health, shoots inform roots and vice versa. So good luck with that, but I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So somebody has a question about manzanita. They've planted a half dozen different types of manzanita 2 years ago, and they all died.
They all died.
They have tons of gophers on their site,
okay.
But they're wondering if they're overwatering. It was on a slope, and they were watering twice a week.
Initially, how I mentioned with initial planting, once a week for a few weeks. But if it kept going on, that you said, how often a week?
Twice a week.
I would say that's too much. Also, when you bring in the animal factor, but I mean, I'm assuming it was during planting season when it wasn't super hot. But to me, I mean, twice a week for how long? I mean, if this person would want to email me personally so we can talk about it more, I would like to try to do a little detective work on this.
Okay.
Because having that many die and that many different varieties, different species, yeah, maybe too much water, or like you said, the gophers. But with the animals, hopefully you'd be able to see some signs of that. But yeah, right. To have that many die all at one time is, I would love it if that person could, we could talk more.
Okay. Okay. And then, so how long should we expect these plants to live, like such as sage? You know, what is their lifespan typically?
That's a really good point. I did forget to mention, say on a couple slides back that I kind of went through fast, the Abutilon palmeri, it's known to be short-lived. You know, what is that? 4 or 5 years. Trichostoma, woolly blue curls, can be a short-lived plant. What does that mean? 3, 4 years. The point is they want to, you know, spread their seeds. What was the example? Sages.
Sages.
Here at the garden, older, I mean, I have big plots of black sage that have been there for years. I mean, other than getting kind of lanky and big and woody, and then they kind of lose their compact form, I don't know if a sage, you know, and some, Peter, my boss, the director of horticulture, he said, plants are like people. Sometimes they get sick and other people don't, or other plants don't get sick and die. You know, plants are kind of the same way. But there's nothing, you know, ringing in my head saying, yes, you know, sages have a short lifespan. And the key too is, you know, even that, say that mother plant that you plant, the real key behind all this for me is to get that to spread and then take out that big mother plant and let the little volunteers come in. But yeah, nothing's flashing red of sages and super short lifespans of, say, a couple seasons.
Okay.
Yeah. And
then really quickly, can you say anything about watering and pruning native grapes?
Native grapes. We have Vitis Gigantea, I believe, the desert grape here. I mean, right now it's leafing out and should already be leafed out and have some little fruits on it. And they're actively growing. So if you, like I said, sometimes you have to do what you have to do and cut them back. But we have grapes on the fence line all along the east side of the garden. And we will have volunteers and the horticulture staff cut them back to the fence line to make wreaths, actually. And that's we didn't do it this time around because of COVID, but I think that's like January, February, because they will go deciduous. I mean, that's the best time to really shear them back when they've gone deciduous, like with most plants. If, you know, plant has lost its leaves naturally, that's the time you can really see what you're working with and things like that. But if a grape is getting out of control, you know, sometimes you have to cut it back. And they're survivors and super strong plants, so I don't think you're negatively affected by honestly pruning it at any time of year. But that's when we do it here, when they're deciduous.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Could I go on to the so in here? So resources for you. Obviously the garden and its staff members. I will talk to anybody for however long you want to chat anytime. I mean, I have a lot to do, but anybody who's showing interest and is excited about California native plants, you're speaking my language. So my email is there at the bottom. You know, you can email me or come to the garden. I'm around. Would love to see anybody in person. Grow Native Nursery, our nursery here at the garden, it's closed right now. But there are other California native nurseries. I don't want to start naming a bunch of names because not a bunch, but I'll forget some and won't say others, but look online. Internet resources. I mean, they're on the front screen of my phone, CalScape and CalFlora. and Las Politas. Tons of tips, show you their needs, you know, when to prune them, how big they get, natural distribution, you know, what they host, what type of animals and insects they host. This is something that I am going to get with Kristen to send her this PDF. This is kind of a little Easter egg for everybody that's here. Percy Everett, he was the Hort director from 1950 to 1970. So for 20 years, and they digitized all his notes. And it's a PDF that I can send out. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages long. How certain plants did at the garden, what their propagation was, what their culture was, or, you know, their horticultural care, what did well, what didn't. So I am going to get with Kristen to get this to everybody. I mean, everybody should have this who cares about it. It's a huge resource. It's as good as these two books, California Native Plants for the Garden, which I've seen available online, and then California Native Trees and Shrubs by Lenz and Dorley. It's hard to get, which is why my copy, it's not going anywhere. And it's hard to find, but honestly, if you emailed me and said, hey, Chip, what do Lenz and Dorley say about Arctostaphylos glauca, Big Berry Manzanita? I would take a picture of the page and send it to you. I would. And then my email, yeah, J Grubbs. I go by Chip. My real name is Jeff. But yeah, that's kind of with the weird J instead of the C. But yeah, thanks again. I had a really good time. Thank you. And hopefully in person is the next thing. So it would be so much easier if I could show you how to water in person, or to show you especially how to prune in person. So hopefully we can do that soon. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chip. This was wonderful. I feel like it gave everyone kind of maybe a little bit of a breath to like say like, oh yeah, I can do this over the summer, you know. But and also some ideas about what's going to look good throughout the summer, and you know how to prune and just take general care and watering. But yeah, Chip is obviously kind enough to provide his email, so you can all ask him follow-up questions if you have any more. But I will send out a email with these references and websites, and you know, Chip and I will get together to send you that PDF that he mentioned from Percy Everett.
Yes.
So yeah, we hope you all enjoyed and learned something new, and feel ready to go take care of your garden this summer. All
Thank
right.
you all.
So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.